I took a cruise on the last remaining ocean liner in the world, and I stayed in the cheapest cabin on board the entire ship. It was less than half the size of the average hotel room in the US, and it was located right in the middle of the ship with no daylight or access to the outside world. On the ship, there were 286 inside cabins, which meant that realistically there would probably be about 600 people on this cruise alone cruising in inside cabins, perhaps more. Inside cabins are a popular choice for many, but cruise lines very rarely advertise them. They usually promote their suites or their balconies, but you'll never really see an inside cabin on a Cunard advert, and I wanted to find out why. I did wonder if I would miss the outside space. I wasn't sure if this cruise would be any different being an ocean liner instead of a cruise ship, and I didn't know how well a ship of this age would have been looked after. The cruise that I booked was only 3 nights long, so I decided that this would be a good way to give it a go without wasting too much time or money if I didn't like it. We didn't have great weather on this cruise, and I do get seasick, but that isn't something that I was thinking about when I booked this cruise. I just wanted to get on board. I hope that the lack of daylight wouldn't be a problem and that it wouldn't feel claustrophobic, especially since I was sharing this cabin with my brother. I really didn't pay a lot for this cruise though, but more about that later. I knew that the ship was built in 2002, but I hope that the cabins and the ship had been refurbished since then. These photos on Cunard's website, they did look very luxurious. Apart from this one that made it look like our cabin was sliding down a hill, I hoped that at a minimum, our cabin would be flat. On a cruise, you can either pay a cruise fare where you pick your specific cabin, or you can save a bit of money and let the cruise line decide where it will be. I decided to save the money. After all, we were only on board for 3 days, and I figured it couldn't be that bad, which always seems to be famous last words. There were reviews of this cabin that said that it was not up to standard and crumbling, but also reviews that said that it was blissfully perfect and everything you could want in a cabin. The Queen Mary 2 has inside cabins all the way from deck 9 to deck 4, and I knew that I could be right at the front of the ship, right at the back of the ship, or anywhere in between. I could be given one of the cabins with an adjoining door, which most people usually do try to avoid, or I could be given a cabin in a noisy location. I could even be given a cabin which was sideways, which I think that would actually be pretty cool. A couple of weeks pre-cruise, I received an email with my cabin information. I was assigned cabin 6198, and I went straight to Cunard's website to have a look at the deck plans. I found my cabin towards the back of the ship, quite close to the stairs. I hope that being right by the stairs and the lifts wouldn't cause us any problem with noise, but only time would tell. The inside cabin that I was assigned was around 13 meters squared, which is very similar to a shipping container. It was actually around 9 foot wide, which is about the same as a bus. The cabins are made fully formed before being loaded into the side of the cruise ship, so I knew that they couldn't have changed too much since the ship was launched, but I hope that the ship wouldn't feel worn down or old. Sometimes they do things to cruise ships after they've been launched, like they might cut it in half and put an extra section in the middle. Occasionally they do add extra cabins to a ship if they find out they can make a bit of extra money by fitting in an extra cabin somewhere, but I've never known a cruise ship to replace the cabins. When we boarded the ship, our first stop was actually in my parents' cabin because they were staying in a protected balcony cabin, and we of course wanted to have a look around. I have never seen a balcony cabin quite like this one before. It was set back into the ship and protected, which was very useful because we did have bad weather on this cruise. Our first impressions of the cabin were very good. It felt spacious and bright, and I found this giant bra in the back of one of the drawers. The housekeeping team do an incredible job turning around the cabins on embarkation day, and they must have just missed this as it fell down the back of a drawer. Please let me know in the comments if this is yours and I will post it back to you. I hope that our cabin will be as nice as this one without the balcony, of course, and I didn't think that we would have all of this space by the sofa because usually inside cabins are smaller. We headed down the stairs to our room, and I was immediately surprised by how much space there was and how luxurious the little details like the bedding felt. It is difficult to make an inside cabin feel luxurious, but it was these small things that really did do that. I did notice that the bed was made up as a double, even though I had requested twins pre-cruise. That isn't a big deal though, and they're usually just 2 beds pushed together anyway. We did end up writing a little note for our cabin steward and leaving it on the bed, so when we went to dinner later, they changed it and it was no problem. This does happen quite a lot, and I think it would be good if cruise lines would prioritise getting the message from the passenger to the cabin steward, just so that the cabin steward doesn't have extra work to do. They have an incredibly hard job as it is. They don't need extra stuff, especially when you've already told the cruise line. But most cruise lines, they're not good at passing on that message. Still, it was no big deal for us. We were not ready to go to bed at this point. There was a chair and a table to the side opposite the desk, but no sofa like you'll find in other inside cabins on other cruise lines. To be honest, I quite like this as it made the room feel very spacious, and usually if I'm in the inside cabin, I'll probably just sit on the bed anyway. What usually happens is that when an inside cabin has a sofa, that space has been taken away from the bathroom, and personally I would prefer a bigger shower over a sofa. It wasn't too long after this that our suitcases arrived, and normally I would say I didn't pack much, it was just a 3-day cruise, but this was a 3-day Cunard cruise, and some of the dresses that I like to wear to dinner on Cunard cruises do take up most of a suitcase. Cunard are the most formal cruise line that there is, and there were plenty of mirrors around the room so that you could have a look at your formal wear. When you cruise, you put a luggage tag on your suitcase and then it's taken away at embarkation in the port. It magically arrives in your cabin later in the day, and realistically they're probably moving about 3,000 pieces of luggage in a couple of hours, which is just mind-blowing. There was plenty of storage in this cabin for me and my brother, and these cabins do technically hold 4 people, although that would be more of a squeeze. The 2 extra beds come down from the ceiling, and these are called Pullman beds. I have stayed with 3 other people in an inside cabin like this before, and although it's okay for a couple of days, I wouldn't recommend it for much longer. The design of the drawers and the fixtures did look a bit dated in terms of style, but nothing was damaged, nothing was broken. They were very spacious drawers actually, and we didn't even end up using all of them. One had a safe in it, there was a minibar fridge down here too, and we had enough space to put our suitcases in the bottom of the wardrobe. One of the biggest complaints that I hear about cruise ships is that they never have enough plug sockets. I wouldn't expect a ship built in 2002 to have a lot, but there were 2 UK sockets and 2 US sockets on the desk, which was more than enough for us. It is very rare to see UK plug sockets on a ship, so that was a real treat. I did use one of the sockets to plug in my daylight alarm clock, and this is my favourite thing to bring when I'm cruising in an inside cabin. It lights up slowly to simulate the sunrise, and it means that you don't wake up in the pitch black like you normally do in inside cabins. There weren't any plug sockets by the bed and no USBs, which is to be expected on a ship of this age. I did really like the bedside tables with the lamps though, and it was a great place to store pyjamas or small things that you don't want to lose. There was more storage up the top, but we didn't need that. One of my favourite things about this cabin was the kettle, and it's pretty rare to get a kettle on American cruise lines, but even though Cunard are owned by the American company Carnival, Cunard is still a very British experience, and there would be outcry if there were no kettles in the cabins. I would join in with that too, because I need a kettle. There were biscuits here too, replaced daily, which I did take home for emergencies. I think of taking biscuits from cruise ship cabins the same way as people take shampoo from hotels. I have paid for them, and I'm going to take them home. There's enough food on the cruise ship to eat, but maybe one day I will need an emergency biscuit, and I always do, so better to be safe than sorry. Our room was cleaned twice a day, once in the morning when they would make the beds and tidy up, and then again later when they would turn down the room and they would leave us a daily schedule and a chocolate. It's amazing how fast you can get used to having a bedtime chocolate, and I think the real question is, would you eat a bedtime chocolate after having brushed your teeth? Because I always brush my teeth, get into bed, and then find the chocolate there. It is a dilemma. Next on my to explore list was the bathroom. It felt quite spacious, and that is the British quite, not the American quite. There was the classic cruise ship toilet that worked using suction, and I do feel as though this space looks quite dated, but it worked perfectly, it was always clean, and the shower was actually pretty good despite the fact that there was a shower curtain. It even had a little washing line here, and that is your Britishism of the week. Here in the UK, you would use a washing machine to wash your clothes, so the things that go in the washing machine are called washing, and if you're going to wash some clothes, you'd say you're going to do the washing. You would therefore put the washing on the washing line. Washing doesn't sound real anymore, but that's what it is. Despite being right by the stairs, we never heard anybody walking up and down the corridor. Cunard aren't known for being a party cruise line, and I think most of the guests were in bed by about 10 p.m, so that probably did have something to do with it. One night we actually stayed up until midnight, and we had pretty much the whole ballroom to ourselves. They were kind of putting the chairs up and hoovering around us. One thing that was very popular on this cruise was walking laps around the promenade deck, and even though we were right below it, we never heard anything. It wasn't exactly the weather to spend too much time outside on our cruise. We sailed from Southampton in February, so most of the time we just had to wrap up warm. It was almost good for us that the weather was consistently bad, because being in an inside cabin meant that we really had no way to know what the weather was actually like. Sure, you can Google what the weather's like if you have internet access, you can have a look at the camera that's on the TV, but it doesn't really give you a good idea of what it actually feels like outside. So sometimes you do end up getting dressed and you have to come back inside to get changed again. But really on this cruise, it was just, which coat do I need? Is it cold or is it cold outside? Are we going out or are we going out? Despite the time of year though, we never really felt any movement on this ship. It's never nice to feel seasick on a cruise, but when you're inside, it's definitely not something you want to have to deal with. The Queen Mary 2 is an ocean liner though, which meant that she is built for sailing long distances, and she's much better prepared to handle rough seas than normal cruise ships. There are more differences between ocean liners and cruise ships, but the main difference is an ocean liner goes from A to B, it's made for traveling, and a cruise ship is made for sort of just floating around in circles and having fun. Another one of my favourite things about this cabin was that the room service was free, and this is free in all the cabins on Cunard ships. I suppose it would have been good if we did have a sofa so that we could sit there and eat, but we had 2 chairs and we really just ordered room service to test it. On most cruise lines you'll have to pay for some room service, on some cruise lines you'll have to pay for it all. In total I paid £349 for this cabin based on 2 people sharing the room, meaning that my brother also paid £349 for the 3-night cruise. Considering the fact that that included the entertainment, the food, the use of the ship, I do not think that is too bad. This price didn't include the daily gratuities or the tips that are automatically added on at $14.50 per person per night, and it also didn't include any drinks, but I just paid as I went with the drinks and I didn't really spend much on this cruise. My parents, who had the balcony cabin, paid £449 for their cabin, which was only an extra £100 compared to the inside cabin. For me, I'm glad I picked the inside. I really didn't need a balcony, but let me know if you would pay the extra £100, that's around $125, for a balcony instead of my inside cabin. On most cruise ships, you'll find that you have inside cabins, you have ocean view cabins that have a little window, and you have balcony cabins that have a view of the ocean. Normally there's nothing in between those, but on my last cruise, I booked a balcony cabin that only had a view of other cabins. It had no ocean view. To find out how that was and what some of the unexpected downsides were, check out this video next.